Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. When the inner dimensions roar. And so, I would like to speak about how passion is a very important window in human living and how it arises. You know, there's many people, many writers who feel they have writer's block. There's many people who feel that they can only see to a certain range and then their limits are all that they can see. When the inner dimensions roar, to get into the talk, just a second, guys, I gotta fix something. Okay, there we go. When the inner dimensions roar. So, ladies and gentlemen, my intention is that I find the human being to be in some position. And we have had many scholars, many people in history attempt to figure out the human condition only to realize that in certain moments the unconditional appears. The laws of the universe that move beyond the fabric of our interpretation and identification. There's many ways that the world moves that you as an individual do not see. And so it doesn't mean just because you do not see movement, there isn't any movement, you know? And sometimes when the person, like in some sense, looks in the mirror, you don't see your brain, yet you know you have it, you know? What I'm trying to say is that there are edges to the conscious mind. And I have been living through this life, you know, many years of my life passing by, not asking a question that was the most important question. It was the mask that my soul was wearing. For a long time, I knew that, okay, there is something here more than I can explain. It's kind of like the presence of intelligence, you know, it's like, what is awareness to self? You know, those people who are doing practices to become self-aware have forgotten that it's like when you, anything you do in regards to an individual self will keep you in that state of mind. So what it is that you realizing self is the presence of awareness. The inner dimensions roar, I find, when the person realizes an unbound freedom. Anytime your mind taps into the unconditional, there are many treasures in this universal sector. And some not, you can say a common treasure is like a physical treasure, it's objective, but an uncommon treasure is a state of mind. So you see, it's as if like you have an objective self and you as a person have a subjective self. So the moment, just like we have two eyes that see the same, we have a subjective sense of identification with the moment and an objective sense of identification with the moment. The subjective sense of identification is pretty much how we are living in a world before our actions become public or expressive, you know, externalized. Language was the mask. was the missing piece. I had wondered about it. The experiential realms, they were very self-evident, almost instantaneous. When you experience something, you are already in the experience. But on a subjective realm, I had kind of recognized the infinite ability of subjective expression. So what that means is you can put an object in front of a person, and based on that person just staring at the object, that object will begin to, like two chemicals reacting, infuse with that person's inner realm. This is kind of like the point of the difference between meditation and concentration. Meditation is abidance in your true nature ultimately, but concentration is the single pointedness of your attention. So you see, we have to kind of think that, okay, at least one clue we have in this cosmos is that we are existential beings. You know, there is something here, and we're wondering about its intensity of here-ness, like how here it is, and we're coming to the realization that the awareness and the self can be in two separate dimensions. This is really what Rene Descartes' mind-body dualism implied. You know, that there is an experience that is happening that is subjective, and that subjectivity is like, I can visualize in some sense like this laptop in front of me hovering in the air. How come gravity doesn't influence my visualization? How come when I visualize it going in the air, that visualization didn't come down instantly? Because it seems like the subjective realm is its own room. And the way I kind of approach metaphysics is becoming aware of the various rooms you're in. And some of these rooms will be in your unconscious. Some of these rooms will be in your conscious mind. I find the ultimate passion of human design would be to walk with its world. I think ultimately any sort of competition will lead to a lonely ivory tower. It's something that you administer in your conscious attention, or you at least consciously observe. There are certain, you can say, subjective patterns that externalize, and certain subjective patterns that don't. For example, the words I'm saying now are like a certain subjective pattern. Now, when I kind of look at, you see, of course, every person's mind has a certain potential. As Robert M. Persick said, it's as if like we take a handful of sand from this infinite beach and call it, you know, our awareness. The implication of what I'm saying is that what if every thought every person has that can be identified in language, in a narrative, is hollow? This is a chaotic potential. That language is our own clay. We have been sculpting it. All our measurements seem accurate and perfect because we are choosing to see that precision. You see, Rene Descartes, he had his approach was a methodical kind of doubt. Like this dude was like, imagine like one day you see a person who's doubting everything, you know, and you go ask him, hey man, why are you doubting everything? And the person's like, because I want to find that which I cannot doubt, and that which I cannot doubt is the truth, you know. And so Rene Descartes went on doubting, 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 everything doubting, until he came to the conclusion that there is an isolated thinking subject that cannot be doubted. So pretty much this is the moment where the doubter is wondering if he can doubt himself, only to realize the one asking the question cannot be doubted. It is the action in the moment. You know? So we have years later, Hegel, if I remember correctly. Hegel, this German philosopher, responds as kind of René Descartes, like a lion of philosophy, roars. The isolated thinking subject cannot be doubted. I sometimes feel philosophers, not to kind of make it like a stereotype, but I feel like those philosophically oriented speak a hidden language of the unknown. They have a courage that, unlike the common ups and downs, like peaks and troughs of personhood, it becomes like there is a strange courage in the eyes of every being when they find the thing that they're meant to do. I find that we are, just think about it, very simple way of kind of viewing the situation on Earth. Creatures. Now, we don't know exactly how the evolution was, where the origin and the thing is. It's as if life is strange. You are present in a world, but when you come looking at where the origin of this world is and where the end of this world is, we're kind of lost. We don't have the technology, or we can't go back in time or into the future. And so all we are left with is a sort of game. Now, this game is singular. It's like a just one person game. Now imagine you have an online multiplayer game with millions. So I feel the sophistication of the psychology of human beings, the best thing it can be in the future in regards to diplomacy between nations and whatnot, between various organizations, is that they got to start playing games. So it's as if, like, imagine you are somewhere and someone else is there too, and you have no idea who that person is. The realities are off. What you do is you start playing a game, and as you play the game, others can be invited to it, others can enter it. Others can engage something that does not touch their personal dimensions. I feel I feel maybe perhaps there's some people who may listen to these talks and feel as if I'm speaking of a world that is not what they see. And of course, we cannot. It's like, if the only way I could say a world that would be exactly the world you see would be as if I was a clone of you or you were a clone of me. And thank God the cyberspace kind of culture's depression has not landed yet. Right now, all I know is that any person alive in 2020, your behavior is pioneering how the cyberspace culture is going to emerge. The cyberspace culture is going to be a more intimate relationship of technology with man's mind. Right now, we see technology and we see it as a physical thing, like, yo, look at that nice car, look at that nice jet, look at that nice AI ruling everything. About to rule everything. So we see kind of like man's technology in his observable domain. So it's as if, like, if you were to use a computer, you're outside that technology, you're observing it. Now, I noticed language when I think one of the most remarkable things that I caught on to was that I found the distance between my experience of the moment and the language that was defining and giving color to those moments. It's as if the outline of your intelligence is experiential, but it's colored in. It's like in that outline, it's colored in with various ideological patterns. Ultimately, this is kind of course, this is my mindset personally, like, that I see life happening in programs. That means when I see a person, I know if they're a person who has one app open, like if their mind was some sort of interface, some sort of like similar to a phone, like they either have one app open or they have a bunch of apps open. Have you ever spoken to someone and you were like talking to them and they were kind of nodding as if they're listening, but their attention was totally on another event occurring, another internal event? It's like when teachers speak and the child daydreams. Look at how naive the educational system is. The teacher like slaps the ruler. It's like, holy shit, this kid's not listening to my magnificent words. And the teacher slaps the ruler like a savage, like a Viking on a table. you know and the teacher says, stop daydreaming, pay attention, you know And the kid comes out of that state daydream, imagine. Now, I feel this is the old way. The modern way is the teacher stops the class to gives the child two options who has daydreamed. One, you can feel free to share what you were daydreaming about. The second thing is, I just feel that should be open in just kind of high school culture, in just from middle school culture to opening. Because the thing is, if school is not making you into an advanced communicator, then you don't understand why you need education. Most people feel education is for the survival of their work. They have not still realized that there are certain questions in every person's personal domain, personal in their own subjective realm, that those questions can literally, they can gain dust until you ask your eyes what you have in some sense been afraid to go beyond. Sometimes the truth may appear simple. Sometimes the truth may appear complex. Sometimes the truth may appear void. Sometimes it may appear infinite. I have had moments where I've interpreted the inner logos, that inner guiding voice, as a voice. There's been moments where it has just been geometrical patterns. There's been moments where it's as if I saw what was in others was actually within me. It's as if for a second I felt free will. Not only free will didn't exist, the soul didn't exist, because it was in an ocean of souls. And so it meant, what that meant is, when you look at reality, of course, you can see it as just pure materialistic kind of like matter. Just every person is electrons. Like right now, what the person is, he's a hallucination of electrons. Because he's a hallucination of electrons, how could there be free will? So free will is shot out of the room. You get rid of free will when the laws of the macrocosm become more less blurry. The more the macrocosm, your attention goes to the macrocosm, it's as if the less your judgment on yourself is based on a microcosmic value. So what I mean by that is, we are like the ants to the greater universe. And so as ants, I feel if this life has created a situation where I can look an ant as a higher being and being like, oh, look at that ant, just being an ant, I'm like, probably there's a high percentage that I am in the garden of dimensions beyond, and we are the ants of realms that we can never comprehend, yet we can, storify in our own way. It's kind of like the thing, right? Most people actually, I think, regardless, even if you see the toughest person in the world, the most kind of, tough guy in the world, that tough guy, for how many years is he going to be tough? Like, for how long? For how long constantly just being an image that is only important to your mind? You see, power and influence are good arguments. I mean, why not? If you're temporary, why not experience, the limits? But I am telling you, there is something more to this life, and it's something that 8 billion people have to strangely share their inner realms, and some sort of network of renaissance like network is going to develop, I feel. This is more than the internet I'm speaking about, So what I'm saying is, it can, like Elon Musk said, it's the nervous system of it's the nervous system of the being, right? Internet is like the nervous system. I feel there's going to come a technology that's going to be like the lungs of man. What I mean by that is, the technology is going to be the breath of knowledge. So it's like, once there's awareness to a body, like, think of it this way. We are like the cells in our body. Just like the cells in our body gather around and they become tissues, similarly, it's as if human beings gather around and they become collective identities. They become collective attention, collective directions. I feel life gives you an opportunity always to choose the intensity of engagement with the manifest world. And so really, we don't have the experience of birth to have an experience of death. We have the experience of awakening into an individualized consciousness with a name. So that means, if I tell you, remember your childhood, and you remember, and then I say, remember earlier, and you're reaching a point in your childhood before you learned language, before you were even a character in a story before even the concept of the story had emerged. And so the process of living is in two ways. Some people learn through the environment. Some people learn through their inner environments. So what I mean by that is, like, some people don't need to try something because their mind can in some sense imagine a certain range of the consequence of the phenomena. But some people have to move. It's like, what that means is there's some people on the planet who think better when they're calmer. There's some people who think better when they're at a higher speed, a higher intensity of life. It's like, you may be surprised that the more kind of obstacles you have in your life, the more challenges, the more puzzles this cosmos throws at you every day. And it becomes a situation where you see it's as if it commands strength. So a person who's doing a bunch of things, usually people who multitask, in order to complete their task or to be able to do it, they have to assume strength. And this is something that is not taught to kids, to in some sense navigate and, like, first direct your subjective realm, then act. And therefore it becomes something where the person never feels there are anything you consciously create, you trust. So if you kind of experience your moments of life here as you creatively kind of live in it, that means you're trusting. And so what happens is, when the mind gets used to trusting itself, it opens up, it reveals hidden gifts. In Tibetan Buddhism, it was like inner treasures. It was like treasure revealing, but within. You're revealing the nature of the manifest reality. You're revealing the nature of how there is light in our eyes right now, that we are seeing the objective realm. So what that means is sensory perception is solar powered. And so if sensory perception is solar powered, it's as if, like, I feel the sun is, the sun's beams hold within it a unique pattern that, upon hitting the earth so many times repetitively, generated a sort of consciousness where it's as if, like, just like how our heart beats on and off, just like how we exhale, inhale, the dualism that our biological system requires to maintain seems to have come from this pattern. That's one thing we can be certain about. Many things on the surface of the earth were changing. They will forever be mysteries. But one thing we see from an astronomical view, that the geometrical relationship of a planet, and imagine a planet having a lot of moons. Do you know how much more random darkness it will have? There will be greater blockades. And of course, the oceans are going to be messed up too, I think. So I think actually the more planets strangely revolve around, the more moons revolve around the planet, the more the worse the oceans are to surf. To be honest, without having an ability to see the opposite of your moment, I don't know how you can move beyond the language threshold. For me, it's as if, don't think I'm holding on to imagery. I realized something very early on, that everyone leaves empty-handed. If you sometimes hear me speak, there is a sort of the greatest thing that man can do is accept where he is. And if where he is a relationship between space and matter, Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and what's within consciousness, I feel ultimately we are a field of intelligence attempting individual consciousness. I actually feel that our personalities are only here because of our bodies, and there is no telling if there can be consciousness without a body. Not that there's no telling, but there is a potential that space can be alive regardless. As if, imagine space was a substance we couldn't understand, we couldn't perceive, and this substance harbored the consciousness of it, that we were like, where is it? How is emptiness looking at itself in the mirror? For me, life, it has oscillated between moments where I felt I had to do something, and moments where I knew, regardless if I did anything or not, the system's movements are too great. So there is a thing. There is a thing that the real fear hits. Like you can kind of imagine back in the day, imagine those kind of epic wars. You know, we see TV shows kind of make, TV, and we see in television kind of replications of these moments in history where there was great battle. And so there was something that, regardless if I saw the TV show animated or not, I could imagine that it was as if the kingdoms were at war, and from each kingdom the brightest minds had come to combat. So it would be one thing where the general would see the army, and the general would see the army that may, in some sense, they may be defeated, you know. But the situation is that the general's eyes are different than the soldier's eyes. The soldier is the soldier because the soldier still sees itself. The general, it's like the same time all the soldiers are like, holy shit, look at that army coming towards us, right? The general is looking at the psychology of the will of the men. He's looking at how is their army marching. Is their army marching fearlessly, or is their army just as scared as like his army? The general starts seeing data and in information, visions and patterns where there isn't. And so then strategy comes. Strategy, I have known that the inventive spirit finds the person when there is a passion they cannot let go. It's as if they saw something in life with such divine beauty that it's as if they can never forget it. They will be pulled towards it, And so in some sense, the general looks at the battlefield. And it's like, holy shit, people are going to die. And it is inevitably a war. It's a battle of minds. So it's a battle of willpower. It's the battle of strategy. It's similar to kind of chess. When you play chess, what's occurring is you're capitalizing on the mistakes of your opponents. The psychology of your opponent. A lot of communication, of course, it's not just physical, it's body language as well. Sometimes children who are supremely inside their inner realms, they may awkwardly move in the public, but they are more than normal, The tolerance that civilization commands is for the mind, and what the mind is potential. I want you to think as if you're conscious energy right now, and your mind is the potential of this energy to become kinetic. And so when we're looking at how the inner momentum, because like for example, you don't necessarily need a narrative to have being. That means imagine how many things you have done in this life that even if you were to write down, those sentences would never be the experience. And so every great writer in history has had to endure all the unhidden, all the stuff, all the content of their inner experience that doesn't get to make it out into the page. So what that means is, for me, similar to writing, life is about the observance of various patterns and how they appear to you. And with the trust of the intelligence, one begins to experience their own subjective realm moving at a faster speed. Those people who go attempting to chemically induce it will, at some point, if they reach this sort of kind of life sensitivity, will be out of their body. But what I mean by out of their body is that how can I tell you? It's like we are experiencers. The experiencer is part of a room where there is a strange authorization for its own expression. What that means is, it's like whether free will is an illusion or not, it's here. And so the appearance of here comes into question. It's as if like all of knowledge to you can be just one specific ideology, or that one ideology becomes just a pigment on a canvas, and as you zoom out, you see the endless branches of knowledge stretching out in the universe. The ultimate integration of all positions of individuality. The void that is the commander of the living. Because our inspiration is based on what we do, right? The thing is, like, if you look at it evolutionary wise and you were trying to think about the purpose of the human being, well, guess what? You look at a tree, a human being is not a tree. So what does that mean? That means part of the purpose of human existence is actual movement. Like, imagine a person just standing all day in one place. So that's being a tree. Okay, that's like not physically moving. So it's important to realize the purpose of the evolution. A purpose of the evolution is not to be to play the cards that you're given, to be as advanced as as evolution is authorized. You know. So what that means is the human being is not a tree. So what that means is part of purpose of life is movement. Then we see the human being is also not an animal. And how do we distinguish this? Because the animal does not have the sophisticated observance and usage of language, but at the same time, the animal is not aware of its mortality. It is living in the moment as the instincts of its natural environment. So you can say animals of before, like beneath the human being, the environment is being their imagination. That means they're not technically selves. They don't technically, I think, experience themselves as a self. You know? That's man's kind of shiny armor. Some moments define you, but some moments you define. And to be observant and aware of this is the ability and sensitivity that I feel the advanced communicator of the modern era requires. You know what I realized, guys? Ideology and language and thoughts are clothing that can be spun, it's evoked instantaneously and worn. So for me, language can never hold truth. Language is a finger pointing to the truth. It's a mirror. It's an advanced mirror for consciousness. It sees its world in it. Like, just think about what's happening here right now. I'm one human being, and you're another human being, and me and you both are objectively existent on the same planet. But when we speak, we are entertaining our subjective reception of it. Life can be said to be also requiring a certain percentage of novelty. That means it's like, let me tell you, it's kind of like this. If you care for this world and you care for life ultimately, your subconscious is going to become the edge of your manifestation. So what I mean by that is like the way we enter the room defines the room we enter. The same person can enter a room in a way where from the beginning hostility. The person can enter a room in a way where from the beginning grace. I noticed that if change is considered slow, progress will be slow. And at some point, the person has to see everyone is wearing a thought. And because everyone has this mask on, you can at least choose the mask. And that's why in society we see there is authenticity and unauthenticity. We see honesty and dishonesty. However, you can also realize that the mask changes as much as the body. Reality is something that is so mysterious. It's as if the world began from mystery. We are all detectives of the unknown universe we reside in. And I feel that there is a there is a spirit to the universal sector. I feel, regardless of our visualizations of the extraterrestrial, or fascination with the animate personalities and the unknown and the unconscious of the planet, you know. I find the soul to be like wind. At least I have experienced many moments where, even though, like, right now I'm in this room, and being in this room, of course, there's, like, I notice my peripheral vision, I notice exactly what's in front of me, I see all the lines of the wall and the room and everything, and even the window, and just all objective phenomena. Still, I can kind of strangely even visualize the gravity that's holding things, but just by seeing things not floating in the air, you know. So what I mean by this is acknowledging the objective realm. After I have become comfortable with my moment, with my presence in my objective realm, that's when the subjective realm can now be noticed without interference. If you escape objectivity, if you're trying to get out of this world to go to a better one, like, I don't know what kind of mentality that is. Do you know? So it's as if it's like throw everything behind. I do understand that there is a person cannot decide on everything. There's opportunity cost, but, like, there's a view of thinking you're on earth and you need to go to heaven, and there are those who realize earth was in heaven. The earth is in the heavens. Man is ultimate by nature. So the Buddha, of course, the Lotus Sutra is a branch of Buddhism where they are acknowledging a story to Buddha's ending, where Buddha suddenly goes into a panic before he dies, and he kind of says something like, I have been wrong. I have been wrong in trying to convert people like, check this out, like, convert people to enlightenment. People were enlightened all along. So what does that mean? That means existence and experience are happening in the same room, yet they don't necessarily have to be conditional. They don't necessarily interfere. That means there are certain ways my mind is that, regardless of what happens in the moment, it's like, what can you do? You become the witness. You become the wind of evolution. You become the actual wind of evolution. You know? And so I find, equivalent to the lion roaring, we need the human mind roaring. And that's the thing. Your imagination is not because you desire it. Your imagination is coming because it's as if, like, there is a strange rush. I mean that in two ways, like, not just an adrenaline rush, but a fascination. Imagine waking up and feeling your species is about to make a great advancement. Waking up feeling your species is about to make a great advancement. At that point, you're like, regardless of who you are, you get the noticing, the discrimination of, in some sense, what deserves to continue and what doesn't. And any person who doesn't abide by their true nature, and they're in a point of decision making, if you are dishonest to yourself in your own decision, let me tell you, that's like literally like as if a part of your ego has been caught on fire, and the karma will be the burning of that ego. I find that if you have a distance with language, then words don't influence your reality much. I feel ultimately, from the beginning of our lives, we have been an experience happening. We have been just like, and we have been an oscillation that's been conscious of itself. Now, how far this consciousness goes, what if we are the animate is a sort of hallucination of the inanimate? What if the inanimate is a hallucination of the animate? You know, those who think it's the animate is a hallucination of the inanimate, you know, they're pretty much acknowledging the universe empty first. So what that means is pretty much all our history and philosophy and psychology has been bound to this dualistic relationship of, is it full? Is it empty? Is there truth? Is there not truth? And these patterns have been like endless dualities kind of living through people's minds. So I feel that how do you get a civilization's engines going? Well, you ask it, why are you here? That's the truth. When you, as a moment, I call this is realizing the love of the species. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like suddenly noticing that the human design is worth attempting efficiency for. It's strange, but if there is a better thing you see, why have you not moved towards it? And if the voice of the past is louder, you will never go forward. Okay, guys, sorry, I needed a quick intermission there. I think the issue is that the modern culture is, rather than confronting the problems of the past, ignoring it. So what that means is we have a kind of inefficient machine-like civilization right now. And if the opposite of people's behavior now, it's as if people are moving away from an inefficient system, but if as if the system was efficient and they moved towards it. Just like a lion is designed to roar, man is a singular dimensional kind of being designed to experience multiple dimensions. We as a species, by making the mind so ambiguous, have stopped looking for it. And so what has occurred is that the educational system has just been repeating the past, teaching the past to the future, teaching the past to the future. And eventually there will come a time where the future will realize that it has to give itself a permission. You know, there are some things in life that will never happen unless behind your eyes they have already happened. Now, this doesn't mean keeping the subject 24/7, going up with this idea that because your attention is on this, everything's going to revolve around this. For me, the thing is, on some level, you got to think you don't know enough to truly live, but the person knows enough to not falsely live. You know, there's certain things that you got to realize you're the student of those universes. And certain universes and realities and rooms of conception, you suddenly see that you're, because you're acquainted experientially to what is being taught, so you feel you know. You know. Napoleon was known to kind of organize his inner realm in a way where he remembered everything by kind of visualizing this like drawer he had, this kind of drawer shelf. So so he would imagine like all the commands for like all one mission in one drawer, another mission in another drawer, one matter in another drawer. And so, of course, he was a being that his inner realms were so powerful that he quickly realized the potential and activated it. Napoleon may, on some level, be okay, he was a conqueror, but like, you know, it's like... At the same time, he had a sophisticated intelligence. So imagine this guy classifying everything he has to do in in an abstract kind of file cabinet of his own, file drawer. See, that's like that guy was using Napoleon was using his subjective kind of realms in that way. Now, I've entertained certain shapes to my subjective realm. Sometimes I've invented a unique kind of just emotional kind of rhythm in my own psychology. But I've also, what I'm trying to say is that you at first try and you fail, and then you want to give up. And that moment when you want to give up, you try a couple more times and then you want to completely give up. Then you try a couple more times and then you realize you've tried it so many times that you now are kind of dedicated to getting... It's like there is a process. Now, this process, the whole point of a species is that one mind is not meant to steer this boat, this ship. It's going to be a cool time. It's going to be, I think, in the next 50 years, if what I say, if I'm on point, right now it's 2020, I think by 2070, we're going to go through very liberating states of cultural experience. So you see, right now, our differences are identifying us. But I feel there's gonna come a time where every person on the planet is gonna be like, okay, let's just chill for a second and see what if an advanced civilization was possible. If somebody came up to you right now and said, hey, person in the world, what if tomorrow, what if we said that we can have this kind of agreement that tomorrow we're going to have the greatest, most advanced civilization? Would you invest in that? And the guy's like, of course I would invest in that. And so you see, it's as if because we, at the back of our minds, are surviving. Like if you ask someone, all right, so let's say you're the greatest survivor in this world. You know, you are surviving in the most fittest way right now, imagine. So okay, so what's after survival? What's after that challenge? And so you see what man does is he adds dimensions. So I'll give you an example. For example, there's a pen in my hand. I look at this pen. First dimension is just me seeing the objective realm, pen in my hand. Second dimension, like the next added dimension to it, when I look at this pen, I notice that its lid can come off. Now the third added dimension is I playfully wonder if I took off the lid of this pen, maybe there's a knife in there instead of a pen. That's like another added dimension. Then I wonder, okay, let's say I took it off and suddenly this pen, this knife kind of blew into kind of like a Japanese samurai kind of, like the pen kind of became a samurai sword. Do you know what I mean? So, and then I imagine, I think from that, wait a minute, what if in the future people's pens could suddenly become weapons? So you see, as you add dimensions, the thought gets momentum, then passion arises for the wonder that's opening. And so as you trust the unknown, suddenly knowledge recalibrates. It's like we can say a smart person can learn from others, but a wise man can also learn from himself. Him or herself, like it doesn't matter. Like your face. Honestly, so much of reality is ideal worship and ideological costume games, that language costume games, that really, for me, when I kind of walk in modern society, I'm like, okay, well, it's like nice, nice. This is how the program looks like. This is, I guess, what I deserve as a human being. You know, to walk by the downtown of a country and look at the stores and see like food, clothings, digital food, corporate. It's like so many different things. But I wondered, it's like, does the human being need artificial armor? Do we need constantly to bask in our own uniqueness 24/7? There's the difference with I think an advanced communicator and a person who is not an advanced communicator, I guess. I mean, I consider everybody is, but on some level who doesn't care for the potential of it. That's like a person, like an advanced communicator. I give it at least this definition, that the communication, whatever they communicate, they are not attached to it. Because if I become emotionally inclined to one phenomenology that I communicate, then the whole communication will be based on that. So it's as if actually freedom of speech meant freedom of a mind that could conceive anything. But when you look at civilization with its certain structured patterns and rules and regulations, it's as if you're like, okay, how can I have freedom to be anything, where the only way of kind of accessing the social structure is by go walking with the herd? And so it's as if, like, does the herd often know? Like, this is kind of it's a way of, I think it's a tactic of war. Do you know? Where it's as if, like, the army that is moving after some point gets occupied with the inner bubble rather than the outer. It's like people stop asking deep questions when they get kind of too many simple answers. You know? My request, Mr. Within's request, is simply for every human being to realize nobody has their eyes, and you owe it to your civilization to at least discover what the nature of your intelligence is. It's an unknown kind of question for all of us. Because even if we give a response to the hardest questions of the hard problem of consciousness, we see it's as if, so what? What do we do with the language that can endlessly repaint the world? That means when you wonder about any sort of progress in any educational field, it's like that progress brings with itself new concepts, new theories. That means there isn't just theoretical physicists. There's theoretical philosophers, theoretical theologists. There's people who can see a wonder ahead before kind of accepting just what is here. There's a kind of story in the Reboot Gita. I forget the name of the people, but pretty much it's this disciple whose guru has gone away for like 20 years, and he's kind of attended his guru's temple. And one day the king came going in town with his elephants. The king's on the elephant, just going through town. And so as the king is going through town, right, this old man comes to this disciple and says, "Excuse me, sir, what is happening?" And this guy looks at this old man and he's like, "Give me a break." Like, and he says, "Nothing, old man. The king is passing through." And then the old man's like, "Kind sir, please tell me, which is the king?" And he says, "The king is the one above the elephant." The guy's getting a bit like, okay. And then the guy says, "Kind sir, please tell me what is above." And then this guy, like as the Reboot Gita says, he jumps on this old guy's back and says, "See, I'm above you right now, just like how the king is above the elephant." And then the guy gets off, and this old guy looks at him, and says, "Kind sir." He's like endlessly graceful. He says, "Kind sir, I'm not asking about what is." He says, "It's like I know what is above, what the king is. I'm asking what is above and below." And then the kid suddenly realizes, holy shit, this is the guy who owns the temple. It's his guru. And the guru's come back, and the guru is like, doesn't even care for this guy's ego. He cares for what the eyes of that living being really see. And so as he asks these questions, they go into this profound dialogue. And so there are what's entertained in the Reboot Gita, like I'll send you a link on the chat section after. Remind me in case I forget, guys. I'll share the audiobook of the Reboot Gita, pretty much. Either the show goes on or the show doesn't. Socrates, when he took that poison, before he took that poison, he gave a speech. He was sentenced to take poison, and kind of like he had some strange intuitive power where he already knew who even had the poison. And so what happens is Socrates says, do not worry about me, pretty much. I don't remember the exact thing. He says something like, "Don't worry, bro." It's like, don't worry, bro. I'm Socrates, motherfucker. But what I'm saying is, really, what happens is Socrates in that moment says, don't something like in the sense of like, don't worry about me. Worry about those people who will suffer with material existence to come, who have to stay in this. He says, "I will go to a place where in that place," guys, I'm relaying kind of a historic event of in Socrates' life. Okay, so please acknowledge that I'm kind of like sharing a history story. So what happens is Socrates says, "But I will go on to a place where either I will go there and there will be no Socrates," his famous words, "no Socrates. I will go in a place where there is no Socrates," but he says, "or I will go to a place where I will get the answers to all the questions my mind has been fathoming in this life." So what that means is that there is no reason to fear a changing system. Consciousness is strangely, unconditionally bound to the conditions of form. I don't know. My inner dimensions roared when I became preferenceless by realizing I don't know anything about what's looking through my eyes. And my whole life I have been masking it in thoughts that have come and go in the moment. And when I realized that, my relationship with my psychology shifted, that I'm like, regardless of how much biological we are, there is a free will access to that private realm of the mind known as imagination, or I say it's the subjective realm. Let me tell you how advanced the human mind is. When a person sleeps, and if they have a dream in that sleep where they're conscious in that dream, and let's say you could move in that dream, you experience a dream that you could move in, you'd wake up and be like, holy shit, my body was inactive, but my mind was simulating a body and a free will and a scenario. So what that means is the mind is living a life. I call this the subjective life. The body is also living a life. The body's life is like whenever it gets tired, you have to sleep. But the mind's kind of life can continue in the dream states. The person can still retain consciousness. Ultimately, all the states of one's being will, I think, inevitably be realized to be the presence of attention. The presence of unknown attention. It is okay. It is okay to realize that there is more than meets the eye. We have feared the unknown for too long. And that is the problem of knowledge. It's the problem of civilization. People are no longer passionate about where they find themselves in. They feel it's oppressive. And the reason is because civilization has no way of accessing what people want. You know, so it's kind of like strange. It makes me, honestly, guys, it brings me to shame, because it's like when I'm telling you, as I was like walking downtown Toronto, like I love Canada, but I'm saying as I was walking downtown Toronto and I was thinking like about a time in Italy, the Medici family came into power, and even though they could have been guys of questionable character, these guys made the city beautiful. They were smart enough to know that if the environment is great, so will be the minds of the citizens. And the advancement of civilization is the only effort. That means it doesn't matter how good you are, how bad you are, when you see something has a potential to continue. And that continuity is a victory for your whole species. It's like how Dylan Thomas says, rage against the dying of the light. Don't go gentle into that good night. So that's what I mean. That means like while we're alive, there comes that roar, that kind of realization. Oh my God! It's like a moment of experience held by the biological system, the cardiovascular system. How the person is in some sense. How can I tell you, the cardiac system? I'm just trying to say, like, the body is a bunch of complex patterns occurring at the same time in the same space. So it's as if humanity is also a lot of complex patterns. Every person having their own kind of access to the world they see and finding commonalities. So what's going to happen is we have to begin rebuilding the Tower of Babylon, but not physically, internally. Every person has to realize that they are free to speak as many languages as they want, but we must create a language called the language of civilization, the language of progress, you know? So what that means is sometimes when, like, Victor Hugo, this European writer, has this thing he says where he says nothing is more powerful than an idea in which its time has come. That means an idea can emerge. Like, even though like I am in no way endorsing communism, but as a person who considers history, we cannot ignore it. We cannot ignore the Cold War. We cannot ignore the psychology of national identities emerging. But I'm saying that I know that it's like the communism is an example. Like many other ideologies are like this, but it was as if suddenly one idea, one potential new view to the person's life. Imagine, like, for example, some people running in the street and it's like, we need equality between the upper class and the lower class, you know, and people were like, holy shit, yeah, and the upper class is like, okay guys, hold on. And so what it was that when one human being had managed to articulate a manner of looking at the world where the system was free, so that freedom translated to other people like a one candle lighting up other candles. It's as if they also saw the potential of that. But we got to also know that something about that communism learned as a result of what happened. That in some sense, I think it was Karl Marx, he said something in the sense of, it's as if the people are, it had a spiritual dimension of the ethics and the nature of the person, and it's as if that ideology was a good, maybe appeared to seem like equal base kind of, but the result was that the character and the psychology of the person hadn't developed to a point for there to be equality. So you see, when conditions are tough, when not everybody has resources, savageness of psychology is more prevalent. So I thought, how hilarious. It's as if money, what is it? It seems to be paper that is green. And it's like, I know that's very 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 like very superficially like very simple, but I'm just saying, just entertain what I'm saying. It's a piece of paper, it's an object, okay, but it's an object with great subjective significance. Do you know? Like money is an object that has like power in other people's universes to influence, for example. So for example, to maintain a business, it's all about realizing something like a lot of people, what's his name, Kevin O'Leary, for example, he's like, understand how money moves, for example, right? So understand how this value moves in the eyes of people, right? But I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is like, ultimately it's self-fabrication like everything else. What I mean is, if language, sorry guys, I gotta drink something. If language was discovered like fire, it means it was sparked by man. And so what it means is the value was given in the void. A value was placed in the void. Now that means any new value can be placed in the void. That means we can wake up tomorrow and suddenly every human being acknowledges how ridiculous the concept of violence appears. When the civility of the mind gives access to actually the actualizations of the self. That means if you as a human being experience the same kind of result ending as an animal, you have not lived beyond an animal. The law of nature is the law of abiding by the presence of one's natural design. The Zen mindset comprehends this, but what civilization needs is new archetypes. So how people enter civilization and what kind of experience they get out of it, at the end of the day, they will come home with a sort of battered archetype. Now that battered archetype is going to influence their emotion on their tomorrow. So if on some level you cannot let go of everything that happened to you in one day, you cannot let go also of everything that's going to happen tomorrow. So for me, it's like an ability for attention to suddenly see the hollow in the full and the full in the hollow. You can see how something can have no meaning or it can be the center of meaning. So the free will is also a free will to realign direction, realign your intent, to look at this world again as if nobody knows, and now you wonder. Start living authentically in your inner realms, and then your outer realms will not kind of reflect that, but you will trust your outer realms. It's like there was someone who kind of really scoped into the phenomena of lying and said the person who's lying, like saying a bunch of things to different people, like as if the person, they say the person is two-faced or the person has multiple faces. What does that mean? That means the person has multiple storylines they have to keep in with various people. Now all of this will overload energetically. So what I'm saying is liars get less access to their intelligence. So if you conclude that dishonesty, of course, it's a possibility. Wear a mask your whole life. Or you can have honesty where you're like, okay, I'm a part of nature. This is my design. Let's just trust it and see what happens. What the void does is either it ultimately stops all activities or inspires new ones. I feel the greatest renaissances are to come. I feel that when we realize the elegance of our minds, when we realize how we can totally revalue civilization, we can build civilization in a way where certain systems are self-sustained. It's as if they ask the person, like, what's a good way of kind of making money? And the person is like, if you're asleep and you're still making money. In other words, value that endures. I feel every person's eyes is their gift. Your subjective self is your choice, but your eyes, the presence of attention, there is something about that it's as if you just don't touch, it's just experiencer. It is before it does, so it cannot be defined by the action. So you reach a certain state where you ask yourself, oh my God, wait a minute, who am I before I do this? And so you notice how even action can be observed by, like you can live throughout. Like sometimes when I speak, I'm kind of also my own audience member. So anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. Pretty much my vision is that if the advanced civilization is possible, we should attempt it. And that would automatically mean that we realize the ultimatum of the individual life. That means if you just live for yourself, let's say you were a person who wanted to selfish your whole life, you wanted to be selfish your whole life. That means you wanted to be self-obsessed. You wanted to just be obsessed about how you were an image to the world before everything kind of was blown away by the wind. You cannot access who you are unless you acknowledge your mortality. You will not care for anything beyond the limits of your realm if you have not experienced anything beyond it. The best thing we can do is keep life as an evolving and advancing mystery. Now, the percentage of what it leads to, the consequences, you see, it can totally be redefined. The thing is, guys, the world's meaning is behind our eyes. The world is behind our eyes. What does that mean? That means we simulate value. That means we could totally reinvent civilization 2.0 in a way where all the things that people feel is not resourceful are suddenly resourceful. The value of everything can increase. It's as if there was this picture that showed this meme on Facebook. Somebody had posted it, where there was like this planet, in this new age kind of thing, like a community, like a group, like a person posted like a planet Earth from space, and then on top of it was like trillions of dollars in debt. And you're like, oh my God, creatures on a rock in the middle of space are trillions of dollars in debt. Now, I'm not saying anything about the financial system. Of course, every system in history has its place. I'm just one guy speaking in a universe of a billion trillion stars. But I'm saying that it's kind of like that if the system has a potential to evolve, it should. If it doesn't have a potential to evolve, then it doesn't even have the confidence to evolve. In other words, it doesn't have vision prior to its action, so its action will be like oblivious and would be ambiguous. Windows of passion are states of mind where the being, by trusting the external realm, automatically trusts their imagination. You know, it's like right now, this pen is in front of me, right? This objective pen. So this pen is like, it's so easy for me to consider a subjective realm to it. It's so easy for me to say, okay, the idea of a pen is existing in my mind right now when I'm looking at this thing, you know, this object. That's true, but now if the pen wasn't here, could I still see that pen here? And if I saw that pen here, would it be agreeable or disagreeable? Would it be frowned upon or good? So you see what it is it's people not realizing that we have to also become responsible of our inner environment, our inner vision, our ability to see that there is great potential in the life that we can live. Because who else can move your own eyes? You know, who can move your eyes? When you understand this, you understand really how truly alone consciousness is. And that's when compassion blooms. You know, there are some people who, it's as if they walk through many dark days, and when the light comes, they not only not have an opinion on it, they feel as if a grace has landed. So I hope that we become a civilization that celebrates its advancement and is oriented towards the progress of the experience of people as if we're tourists in this manifest conscious plane of existence. So we can see that because the person has a lifespan of like 100 years, every person realistically can get enough resources to endure 100 years easily. Do you know? Because it's like the subjective realm is our own fabrication and it's our own maintenance. Life is a game of patterns. And as you go along these patterns, noticing some patterns crystallize, some patterns not crystallize, noticing the space between objects in a three-dimensional reality, also noticing how there's a strange hidden space for the time that you consider. So it's as if every greater dimension will be another unknown phenomenology in the lesser dimension. So as if like in the flatlander idea, if you had like a flat table, and on this flat table there was a two-dimensional world where squares and triangles and circles lived, and suddenly some person comes, some unknown divine hand, and puts a cube on this table. When this cube hits this table, out of all those people who were walking in the streets of that 2D flatland world, suddenly see a square has appeared out of nowhere in the market, and they all feel, what is this? Is this divine? Is this a mystery? What is this? And it's as if they don't see the cube, they don't see the three-dimensional way that their moment is kept. So I find, regardless of our ability as individuals to conceive dimensions, ultimately we will find our dimensions within greater dimensions. So ultimately, there will come a moment where the archetype realizes that it's either like it returns to the void as if it never existed, or it attempts to help in the continuity through the void. It's as if it doesn't matter if life is a dream or not. You know, it's as if progress is progress. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And if you cannot see, or let me say it like this, if your mind has an ability to see an inefficient self, who says it doesn't have an ability to simultaneously see an efficient self? What if it's the attitude towards the behaviors that come as a response to the karmic outcome that suggests the karma? It is now time for humanity to not just study the outer realms, but to study the inner realms. It is not only time to advance outer technologies, we require to advance inner technologies. The main one that's in top of the list right now is language. And if we can find a way to create a more decent, more visionary, universal kind of language, then we in some sense begin creating a platform of smooth synchronization of people's inner realms with the outer realm. So what that means is cultures of creativity will bloom. Cultures that when the person goes inside, it's as if life is telling them, now you're here, help me, you know? So what that means is the advancement of the civilization becomes that important for you. And I say, whoever you are on the planet, at least 10% of your life, you got to care for this 4 billion-year-old science project called humanity. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and